morning. This is Tom, and this is...
Good morning. This is Isaac.
And we're going to be your hosts for today. Welcome to our online service.
And we're going to be your online hosts for today, and welcome to our online service.
We're happy you could join us here in this digital space. And
we're happy that you could join us here in this digital space.
Do you know what season it is, Isaac?
The second season of Epiphany.
It is the 7th Sunday of Epiphany.
It's the 7th Sunday of Epiphany. I have something to show you. It is...
your favorite Lego Star Wars ship?
This is Slave 1.
Boba Fett's ship.
This is Boba Fett's ship, Slave 1, from 2006.
And we're going to be exploring some of those ideas connected with that, and we have a few poems and prayers and readings for you along the way. So blessings on the journey.
Hello, First Congregational Church. I've missed you all very much. I've been on some great adventures in North Carolina. I've spent some time with some really great people. I've seen a lot of sunny days. This one was just last week. Played on some great stages and made some great music. But Michigan is my home. Plus, there's one thing North Carolina doesn't have. Wait, what was the one thing they don't have?
The lovely people at First Congregational Church in Langsford.
It's good to be home. I can't wait to see you all soon.
Good morning and welcome. Please join me with our call to worship today, which is a retelling of Psalm 37, retold by Malcolm Guite. I'll fret no more for passing wickedness, no more than for the new-mown grass that fades to leave room for growth and tenderness. Of fresh green leaves, the cool, inviting glades of my new life in you, my heart's desire. The true sun rises now, and soon the shades, the last black shades of night, will back retire, and mix no more with good. Then I will sing the song of my redemption in that choir, where I, whom you have made, at last can bring my song to its beginning and its end. Till then I'll be content with each small thing your love provides, and let the rich content with one another for their fading wealth, for I have found my God and my true friend.
We light this candle to remind us that Christ is the light of the world and was born as a human being to dispel the darkness of our hearts and mind. We light this candle to remind us that Christ is God's love revealed perfectly, knowing no boundaries or limits and calling us the beloved of God.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 7th Sunday in Epiphany, a season dedicated to exploring the revelation to the whole world that Jesus is the Son of God. Now, this epiphany of Jesus' identity also came with a teaching. As the people of God, we are the image bearers of God, meaning we're to reflect the character of God in this world with how we live. Jesus taught us how to do this very practically, and then lived his life in such a way that illustrated this teaching. Now, the foundation of this way of life is found in today's passage from Luke 6. It is a well-known passage that commands us to love our enemies. But seriously, how do we do this? I don't really know. Well, I found a sermon preached by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1957 at Howard University in Washington, D.C. that really helped me better understand. So I'll be letting that sermon guide this one for my lack of information and understanding of how to do this. Now, today's passage is probably the hardest teaching of Jesus to hear. And so many folks try to write off this teaching because of its difficulty. They say Jesus was just being grandiose to make a point, or using some kind of oriental or Hebrewistic hyperbole. They say that Jesus is talking about, individual piety, but it doesn't relate to people groups and things like that. Or they just conveniently ignore this passage and instead swallow up word for word sections of scripture from Paul that make it harder for someone else to live their life, but it doesn't affect their own. Now, think about the history of the church and how many people were labeled heretical or pagan or blasphemous or outsiders and then imprisoned, tortured, and killed for their improper beliefs. Good illustration we talked about is Galileo. He was called a heretic for believing that the earth moved around the sun, and under threat of torture and death had to recant a totally scientifically true fact of nature. Now, there are many other cases, some with worse endings than this. And it reveals a truth about human nature. Many of us would rather wield righteous power over others than submit ourselves to this hard teaching of Jesus. And yet no one seems to be accused of heretical behavior when they do not love their neighbor, let alone love their enemy. It's always around belief systems. But this Sermon on the Mount, or as Luke has it, the Sermon on the Plain, the flat place, is the foundational teaching of what it looks like to follow Jesus. And yet Christians have historically been known for people that are a people of judgment and not mercy. I think this is where Howard Thurman can teach us, growing up in a very violently segregated and racist and culturally Christian South. He said, Christianity as it was born in the mind of Jesus appears as a technique of survival for the oppressed. That it became, through the intervening years, a religion of the powerful and dominant, used sometimes as an instrument of oppression, must not tempt us into believing that it was thus in the mind and life of Jesus. Thank you, Howard Thurman. We need to hear that. So, if we are to read this passage further and understand it, we must understand how this teaching is a survival technique for the oppressed. Or else it's just going to be another religious billy club that we beat over the head, people that are not loving enough until they submit to our dominant power, and thus miss the entire point of the passage. So let's hear this passage read to us, and then we're going to explore a little bit of what it might mean on the other side.
Today I'm reading Luke 6, 27 through 38. Love for enemies. But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you. And if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. And if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies. Do good to them and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Judging others. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you.
G.K. Chesterton once said, "It's not that Christianity has been tried and found wanting, it's that it's been found difficult and left untried." Now, there's plenty of criticism for modern day expressions of Christianity that do not reflect the actual teachings of Jesus. I mean, Gandhi was famous for saying, "I like your Christ, I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ." And yet the word Christian, which was a label given to us in the book of Acts from the onlookers, means little Christ, one who aspires to be like Christ. So when Dr. King preached his sermon, Love Your Enemy, he asked this question, how do we do this? Now, to quote him directly, he says, in order to love our enemies, we must seek to discover the element of good within those persons that hate us. Whether we realize it or not, each of us is something of a schizophrenic personality. We are split up. We are divided against ourselves. There is something of a civil war going on within the being of every individual. Somehow, the recalcitrant south of our souls is always warring against the north of our souls. That is, in this civil war that continually goes on, we are divided against ourselves. No wonder with a passage like this one that we ignore the teachings of Jesus and instead transform it into a system of belonging or believing or behaving. And then we take the simplicity of this passage and then we yeah-but it all day long. We take the difficult thing and then reach for passages that give us back a sense of power and control. Well, Jesus said to love our enemies. Yeah, but he also took up a cord of whips and drove people out of the temple. Or Jesus said to turn the other cheek. Well, yeah, but in Revelation, he's coming with a sword drenched in the blood of his enemies. So it's really easy to take these passages that are difficult, set them aside, and then reach for the passages that keep us in positions of power and dominance. And it's no wonder this passage is difficult to embody. It's difficult to embody well because of the distance that we now have culturally. Now, these teachings can come across as degrading to a human being. How many have stayed in dangerous, abusive relationships because of a certain reading of this verse? How many traded away their dignity to bullies and con artists because of certain readings of this passage? Now, any such reading of this passage are not close to its intended meaning, as we remember Howard Thurman reminded us. We must remember that Jesus has foreseen the coming destruction of the temple by the Romans, and he sees the inflammatory beliefs and behaviors of the people that will bring it down upon their heads. And he's offering a prophetic teaching on another way to approach this situation, headed for a collision. Now, the people are just fed up with the oppression that they are experiencing from the occupying Romans and the rich Jewish sympathizers who are in partnership with them. The legalized beatings, the stealings, and the abuse is just wearing the patience of the people thin. Now, if a Roman officer strikes you on the jaw, like you're a street dog and not a human, Jesus says, don't act less than and cower like an animal. You stand up to a dignified place and offer your other jaw to remind this person that you are still human. Now, this does two things. It causes the Roman officer to remember that other humans are not animals to be kicked around, and it allows the abuser to take back their dignity. In this culture, it reversed the shame back onto the oppressor and diffused the whole situation fast. So this is actually the opposite of being a doormat for others to walk upon. It is not to prop up the powerful, but to give options and tools to those who had none and believed themselves helpless. Because this helpless feeling would lead to desperation, and that desperation would lead to the very violent insurrection in 70 AD that would overthrow them all, destroying their city and their temple. So this was a subversive teaching that threatened the established understanding of overcoming evil with evil, violence with violence, hatred with hatred. But to recognize the humanity in all, some of us hidden a little bit deeper, but it's still there, and that's what this teaching is meant to do, to illuminate that humanity in us all. Now, human beings tend to naturally be inclined to be selective with who they love. And now by love, I mean to wish good for another, to hope they succeed and find happiness. And when we have the power to contribute to their happiness, we do so. That's the understanding of love here. Now, we save this posture for those who return it back to us. It seems to be our societal factory settings that we wish good upon those we like and ill upon those who oppose us. And it takes a lot of inner work to override these factory settings. And this is what this teaching is about, doing our inner work. Now, Jesus says that even sinners love their friends and hate their enemies. Now, who's he talking about? It's one of Luke's favorite words, actually, the word sinner, but not like the church lady on classic SNL, if you remember that. He uses it actually 18 times in the book, more than the other 3 Gospels combined together. Luke uses it to describe who Jesus prefers to hang out with. It's not about what these people have done with their actions as much as a social descriptor. They are the outsiders who have not found an avenue into public places of worship. Perhaps because their profession does not allow them access, like a tax collector, or perhaps they have a disability or sickness. Now, Jesus, with his statement, even sinners do the same, actually levels the playing field. It is not used in a derogatory method towards the outsiders over there, but it's actually a spotlight on those who consider themselves righteous, that they are in fact just like everybody else. Sinner or saint, these labels are useless in this particular setting. Because if you remember, this is the Sermon on the Plain, and they're all standing on a flat, level place. This leveling of humanity onto one plane, because this is the Sermon on the Plain, is an eye-opening reality for both groups, the sinners and the saints. Those who were poor and dispossessed find themselves elevated above where they thought they ought to be, and those who were entitled and powerful find themselves lowered back down to earth. And it is an act of love for both groups, for it brings us back into contact with reality. When we gather under a banner that we are passionate about and wage war on the banners that others are gathered under that oppose us, and then we win, we merely switch out who's in power without dealing with the abusive system of power that's evil to begin with. And then these new powers find themselves enslaved to the demands of the position of power that they're now in and inflict the same evil done to them, but now onto their old oppressors. And this is the endless cycle. So where is the exit ramp? Now, Dr. King said, there is another thing you must do to love your enemy. When the opportunity presents itself for you to defeat your enemy, and this opportunity will present itself sooner or later, you must not do it. For love, in the final analysis, means understanding creative goodwill to all people. It simply means that you will do nothing to defeat anybody. You will work to defeat evil systems, but not individuals who are caught up in those evil systems. This is the meaning of love, and I believe this is what Jesus means when he says, love your enemies. That you seek to defeat no individual, that you only seek to uplift them. Now, these words were spoken by a man severely oppressed and marginalized, unjustly imprisoned and abandoned by those who claimed the same faith, and then eventually assassinated for his faithfulness. He lived this out in spite of its difficulty upon his lived experience. Dr. King has one more lesson for us that ties into this passage, and it is vital. Rowan Williams, Anglican priest, mystic theologian, and former Archbishop of Canterbury, said that pride is the assumption that you can only flourish at the expense of someone else. I think he nailed a truth here. For to uphold this belief, you have to convince yourself that you are somehow better or more worthy of said flourishing. Perhaps you use your religious status, economic status, ethnicity, political views, nationality, education levels, gender or sexuality, anything we can find to raise our worth in our minds above another person. But to be a Christian means to listen to this hard teaching on the level ground that Luke has us on. So this love your enemy passage does not degrade anyone, oppressed or oppressor. It is meant to wake both of them up. One to their inherent worth, and one to their blind overestimation of their worth. Both come on equal ground to this Jesus who teaches on the level place. For this passage communicates the character of God that we are to emulate and reflect: kindness. This section on judgment and forgiveness is not about retribution, like if you do this, then God will come and get you and you won't experience this. Jesus says that God is kind to both the ungrateful and the wicked. And we cannot judge or condemn others because that becomes the entire frame that we see through. It becomes the air that we breathe or the water that we swim in. It encompasses all of our reality and then bleeds out into our fearful and insecure actions in ways that tear God's creation apart. But if gratitude and forgiveness and kindness become our frame, our air, our water, then we act according to these realities. Perhaps this is why we're to take care of the plank in our own eye before attempting the speck in another's eye. It frees us from fear aimed outward into hatred. Now, Dr. King said, in order to love our enemies, we must begin by analyzing ourselves. It may be that the person or persons who hate you because of something you had unconsciously done to arouse that hate. So begin by analyzing self. I realize that some people will hate you for no basic reason, for nothing that you have done. Some people just will not like the way you walk. Some people just will not like the way you talk. Some people will not like you because of the color of your skin. Some people will not like you because you can do your job better than they can do theirs. I realize all this, but over and above this, we must recognize the fact that some people may dislike you because of something you have done unconsciously, deep down in the past, to arouse this hate response. Therefore, it is vitally necessary to look at self and see if there is something within that arouses this reaction. This is a good reminder because no one is infallible. And no one needs to be. When we set down that fear, honestly look inward, and do our own work, we find ourselves much more at peace, less susceptible to judgment, and able to love like God loves. Let's hear this very simple, beautiful, and profound benediction read by our very own Eugene. We'll see you next week.
Hello, I'm Eugene. And today's benediction: may we go forth into the world in peace, being of good courage and holding fast to what is good. May we render to no one evil for evil, instead strengthening the faint-hearted and supporting the weak, and help the afflicted. May we honor everyone and love and serve the Lord, rejoicing in the power of the Holy Spirit.
Thanks for joining us for our online service, and also, if you have any questions, you could send us a message or leave us a comment down below.
That is true, yes. And if they want to follow us, how do they do that?
If they want to follow us, they can search They
can like our Facebook.
They can like our Facebook or
subscribe.
And if you would like to partner with us, there is a link on the bottom of your screen.
Well, I hope you had a good Sunday, and we will see you next week.
We hope you had a good Sunday, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Peace out.
Face is freezing. Woohoo! Subversion. Warm my cheeks. Cause it's cold. Those cheeks, they're like red. Wrap it up. Wrap it up. Wrap it up. Getting cold.